Joining us now is the amazing Tulsi Gabbard. We have a lot of events coming up with Tulsi Gabbard that we're going to be announcing soon. Tulsi, welcome to the program. So the media is accusing me and others of spreading disinformation on FEMA. You were recently on the ground and you saw firsthand what is true and not true. Certainly, if FEMA was actually doing a good job, and we want to be supportive, but they're not, we have an obligation to call them out. What did you see on the ground in North Carolina?
You know, when FEMA says we are out there and on the ground and we are knocking on people's doors and offering assistance, maybe they're doing it. But I can tell you from my time there on the ground, the folks that I talked to who were off the beaten path in some of the most hard-hit small communities were shrugging their shoulders and saying they had not seen anyone from FEMA. There was no one who had come knocking on their doors. Many of them had lost their homes, and they were asking me to deliver messages to FEMA saying, hey, can you please hurry up and get down here, send the Army Corps of Engineers, pay for contractors to clear debris from a dam that's at danger of breaking, creating yet another disaster upon this disaster. I ended up running into someone from FEMA at an emergency operations center a couple of counties away from them, delivered this message and got a little bit of a shrugged response saying, oh yeah, that sounds like something for the Army Corps of Engineers. It did not inspire confidence in me, Charlie, that they have a very good handle on what's going on the ground. And it frankly reminded me a lot of what we saw and experienced in Maui after the tragic and historic fires that completely razed the town of Lahaina to the ground. FEMA said, we're on the ground, we're delivering $700 per affected family. But what I saw in Maui was similar to what I saw there in North Carolina, which is you have people wearing FEMA jackets in emergency operations centers, perhaps far away from many of these towns that have been almost completely wiped off the map. That's a big problem when you're going out to those folks who have been most affected and they have yet to see anyone from the federal government coming out there and at a minimum just saying, hey, I'm here for you. Tell me what you need. What's the most urgent problem that you guys are facing? And let me see how we can help solve it. FEMA is you know, such a huge bureaucracy. Oftentimes they're putting their workers up in fancy hotels, using our taxpayer dollars in ways, ultimately, bottom line, not getting to all of those who need help the most.
So Tulsi, how does this contrast with previous disaster responses? Obviously, Hawaii was bad. Is this a Biden-Harris administration problem? Is this just the new standard operating procedure? Is this another example of just the decline of the country that is enveloped by this nonsensical bureaucracy? It seems as if we're a country that can no longer do the basic things. And when our citizens need help the most, we kind of turn our back on it. Is this a recent development, and what is the best possible explanation for it?
Unfortunately, in my home state of Hawaii, I've been through a number of different disasters. We've had active volcano and lava flow taking out entire communities. We've had hurricanes, we've had floods, we've had a historic, the most tragic fire in our country's history in over 100 years. We've seen a lot of these natural disasters, and almost in every single case, we've seen the FEMA bureaucracy taking far too long to kick into gear in a way that's actually meaningful and helpful. I don't doubt that government leaders are having conversations on the phone, but the reality is, are they really showing up on the ground immediately where the people need help the most? As you know, perception is reality, and too often in these cases, the perception is that the federal government is nowhere to be found, and yet we as taxpayers obviously are funding what is the #1 emergency management agency in the federal government. What I really look at is leadership and the importance of leadership, especially during extreme times of need. If we have leaders who care at every level, at the federal level and at the state level, if we have leaders who care, imagine that every one of those people affected is your sister or brother or child or parent. You would go to the ends of the earth, kicking down doors, cutting through red tape to be there for them, to deliver what you can. And no, of course, there are obstacles, naturally. But if we have leaders who care, bottom line is they make it happen. They will find a way.
So Tulsi, it's also just a priorities problem. We've spent couple
Yes.
$100 billion on Ukraine, and it seems as if Kamala comes in and says, here's $750, peasants, have a nice time. You're right about care and concern. Why is it that the uniparty in D.C. and Donald Trump is exempt from this, cares far more about funding Zelensky's lifestyle and the pension funds of Ukraine than our own citizens?
You know, I was thinking about that this morning, Charlie, when I'm hearing these statements coming from the White House about how, well, you know, we're not going to, Secretary Mayorkas of Homeland Security, we're not going to have enough money to be able to provide this emergency support to people. And it's different pots of money going to fund illegal immigrants and their emergency housing and their emergency food and support needs. But people who've seen in North Carolina and in some of these other states, their homes being completely swept away, who don't have a vehicle, who don't have a home. Maybe they lost their business as well. I don't see that immediate deployment of, hey, here's a place for you to live. Here's a vehicle for you to use for these American citizens. And they're stuck on like, well, this pot of money and that pot of money. Go to Congress, move the money from one place to another, whatever you need to do. But then I thought this morning, Charlie, you know, somehow when it comes to Ukraine, you remember more than a few times we've seen the Department of Defense say, hey, guys, guess what? We just found $4 billion that we didn't know was there. So we're going to hurry up and send that $4 billion to Ukraine. We saw emergency funding going out to humanitarian crises in Lebanon just the other day. Somehow the permanent Washington establishment, the uniparty that is the war party, they find a way to continue to fund these wars that are not only not in our interest, they're actually counterproductive to our own national security. They put us at greater risk of World War III and nuclear war. But when it comes down to our fellow Americans facing some of the worst disasters that they've ever seen and that our country has seen, they come up with these excuses saying, well, hey, we've already spent $200 million. Like, okay, got it. You just sent another $8 billion without congressional appropriation just a couple of weeks ago to Zelensky, who showed up and knocked on your door with his hand out for more money. What about these residents in North Carolina who are applying for $750 of relief from FEMA and being turned down? It's unexplainable and inexcusable in my view. And it is directly in the hands and on the lap of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden that this is happening.
Of course it is, because foreign abstractions matter a lot more than the immediate concern of the citizens of the country. So we only have a minute here, but I have to play this, and I want to just get your reaction on this. There's a new term called disaster equity. This is your government's disaster preparedness meeting talking about the focus should be on LGBTQIA people. They struggled before the storm, is what your government says. Play cut 27.
LGBTQIA people and people who have been disadvantaged already are struggling. They already have their own things to deal with. So you add a disaster on top of that, it's just compounding on itself. And I think that is maybe the why of why we're having these discussions, is because it isn't being talked about. It isn't being socialized. We're not paying attention to this community.
The shift that we're seeing right now is a shift in emergency management from utilitarian principles where everything is designed for the greatest good for the greatest amount of people to disaster equity.
30 seconds, Tulsi. I guess it's no longer about helping people, but it's disaster equity.
I feel simultaneously like I want to cry and like I want to scream. That this makes me so angry to see that they are not just, this is why they're not doing their job. This is why they're failing. If they were focused solely on delivering resources to those who need it the most, I don't care what your sexuality is. I don't care about anything else. You are our fellow American. You need help. The federal government needs to be there. Period. Full stop.
They're creating a caste system of who gets the resources of the taxpayers based on completely irrelevant criteria. Every citizen deserves help, but disaster equity, so we're not going to help certain people based on your sexual preferences? I mean, this is really dark stuff.